Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
I have learned so much from this gentleman on the process of publishing books. So interesting. And it's not just even about books, it's stories, which translates to even TV and movies. A lot of them do come from books. Today, we're going to look at character creation. And if you've ever thought about maybe writing a book, might want to pay attention here. Obviously, we're talking essentially fiction, but he also helps people with nonfiction books as well and get that done from start to finish, by the way. Mark Pogozinski is here from NFB Publishing. He's our professional of the year. Welcome back. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So character creation, do we want to start at a certain age level, when it comes to characters, um, or is it just in general? What do you think?
I guess it depends on what type of book you're going to write, even if it's just a story. We should have in mind the audience who we're writing for, if it's going to be young adults, children, or adults. And depending on where the writer's ideas come from, that's an important factor too, because you're going to tailor that character for the audience that you're trying to reach.
Sure.
And the classic characters for children's lit, um, they are for the most part children, and they grow up through like the series or through the book. And that way, if a reader gets it early, they grow with the character. And I think that's a good way when you're talking about young adult, especially a lot of the young adult writers that we work with have that in mind. It's not a single book. It's that series of books that they want to produce where they track the character throughout. And that, I mean, that's a great way to do it. It takes a lot of forethought,
Mm.
but a lot of planning. But one of the best advice I ever got about writing characters is that you should have an emotional attachment to the character you're creating, whether you're creating them to be hated in the book, as a villain, to be, empathized with. The characters are important, and that goes, it's obvious, but like the creation of them, it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and the characters have aspects of the author of them. Okay, like your dark side becomes your villain, your good side becomes your hero, and being emotionally attached to your own creation, I think, is vital to creating really long-lasting characters.
Do you feel that many authors, no matter who they are, whether they have experience or not, when you create that character, there are traits of you in many of the characters? Could be a little tiny trait, but it's really you.
I I think it has to be, right? I mean, it's almost impossible to create a character solely apart from you, whether it's the way they speak, a turn of phrase that you include in your book or your short story that you use or that you overheard. I think we mentioned it once before, authors have to be observers, and they're observing the world around them, they're observing the people, and they're also introspective. Like, what drives me? What are some of my, not positive thoughts? Could I use those? Could I translate that into a villain or someone who needs help in the story? I
Mm.
think all the characters, all the great writers have aspects of themselves in their characters. Okay, it might not be a lot, it might be a little, but there's something there that connects you to your creation. And again, I think that makes more vibrant character. I think it makes for a better book, and then it almost becomes easier to write because you know what that character is going to do because that's what you would do. Or in case of the villain, that's what I would never do, but I kind of want to do it.
Mm.
And now I'm going to be able to get away with it in my fiction. And I think you really get into it. And then again, writers is not a trance, but similar to a trance, like stay an hour and a half's gone by and you're like, I have all these pages, I've created this character. I might not use them in this book I'm writing right now, but this is something I'm gonna use this character again and again.
So to recap what we're talking about at this very moment, do you feel that if you're going to create a character and a story, that you should really be thinking about other books? It's not just this is a one-off.
That's a tough one. Um, I don't write in series. When I write my when I write my novels, they are singular novels, and then when I'm done with it, if I like that character and the character survives that first book, then I might think about a sequel beyond that.
Hmm.
That's the way I do it. Other people think in terms of sequels, in terms of the entire plot line. Classic example is Harry Potter. Harry Potter goes through different grades. Each grade is a book that was planned out from the very beginning. Those ideas were there. This is what I can do with it. Characters are mentioned in the first book who don't pop up until the third book. Incredibly intricate planning. And again, some people can do it.
Hmm.
I like if a character survives or a character becomes interesting as I write, then I'm going to use that character again. It might not be a sequel, but I like that idea. Like the random character pops up in all your work, and those people who follow you, who enjoy your work, or are a fan, oh, they're like, okay, this character pops up again. So again, it really depends on what you're going for. If you're going for the full-fledged, Lord of the Rings trilogy, I got it planned out. Excuse me, then go with it.
Hmm.
Again, it takes a lot of planning. Another one, George R. R. Martin with the Game of Thrones stuff. He had flow charts all over the place to try to track these characters, and he hired assistants to track his characters for him because he'd forget, like, what did I do with this character? Did I kill them off? Who are they with? What's going on? And it becomes
Wow.
almost a job onto itself to track something like that big, that huge world that he had created.
I like the idea of the reoccurring character or type of character that pops up. It's almost like what you call it, a breadcrumb, every once in a while. And maybe whatever it is becomes your signature, your writing signature style.
Yeah.
Hmm.
We have an author who's doing mystery books, and they have a reoccurring character. Each book is onto itself; it's a different thing. There are little threads that connect them. The Meryl Connor mysteries, they're called, and she's a blogger who solves crimes. And again, some recurring characters, but totally different plot lines. And you see that. That's a classic way to go about it. Agatha Christie, James Bond, just to name a few characters who pop up again and again and again, but are individual stories.
How do you prevent a story from getting boring or just played out? It's often been said, if you're doing a comedy bit or whatever it might be, know when it's done, know when it's over, know when to, always leave them wanting more.
Yeah.
How do you
Like
know
a
when to do
stanza.
it? Say
Stanza.
again?
Always leave on a high note.
Yes.
Um,
It's so funny you say that because salespeople, and I know one in particular, they will continue talking with you until there's a high point. All right, well, I'll see you tomorrow. And then they walk out.
it's difficult, you create this thing, you have a finite ending, and we can go to like TV is the example. Um, you created this wonderful story. It's gone whatever, 2 seasons, and it's been success. And then someone comes to you with a dump truck full of money and says, "We need another season." And you've seen it on a couple of shows. You're like, "This season is dragging. There's no
Yes.
point. It's going round and round." And
Uh-huh.
maybe they didn't want to write that season, but again, you got paid a solid amount of money to do it, and you're like, well, I love my characters, but I really like money,
Uh,
so I'm gonna push through and try to come up with something. And you see that with writers from time to time, but then some writers will use ghostwriters.
hmm.
And they played out. They have no idea what to do with these characters. Well, let me hire someone. Maybe they can come on
Fresh
and
perspective.
a fresh perspective. They've seen something different in my work, and that goes to the interpretation of a work or a book. And you run into that from time to time. An author has this vision, they write this beautiful book, and they get a review that's beyond what they possibly thought could happen. And you're like, they misread this. Well, you can't say they misread it. They read it and brought whatever they were thinking to the project.
Mm,
So that's again something that we have to take into consideration too, that not everyone is gonna, they don't know our thoughts. They don't know why we're doing it or what
yeah.
we're trying to get to. And they read something else in the work.
Think of a TV series that you feel started off well and then got to just what you said, we're dragging. Because as soon as you say that, I've got one in particular. There's probably a bunch, got to think about it. Which one for you?
You know, you don't want to badmouth anyone else's work.
Well, it's
But
just your opinion. You may say a show, and I'm like, really? I thought it was pretty good. And the one I'm going to mention, I say it to others, and they don't. Not everybody, but some don't agree. They're like, no, it's still good. And I'm like, I checked out.
yeah, I know like Stranger Things hit on Netflix.
Mm,
It hit for nostalgia purposes, and I don't think people quite knew how big it was going to be. So, like in season three, you can see we got to come up with a new villain. We got to come up with what's called the MacGuffin. And I think they circled it a little bit until they figured out what they wanted to do. Another show was like You, again, I think it was on Netflix at first. The serial killer, the first season, you know, and good pacing, and then maybe not so good the second season as they're trying to figure out what are we going to do with this character? We have a deadline. They want the episodes filmed. How are we going to get this done? So, which one were you thinking about?
Ozark.
Oh, okay, yep. You could, and then you could almost see it.
Mm,
And you could almost sense the writer's frustration, like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing.
that's what I felt in the beginning. It was like power. But yeah, this is great. And then I can't even remember what season because I just checked out. It wasn't the characters because they were all still strong. And even I can't think of her, Ruth, I think the blonde hair, she still cracks me up no matter what. But it just got kind of boring. And I accidentally hit the one of the last seasons, and I was like, that's not like I remember when it got boring. So maybe it was just, here, then went here, and then came back up again. But I haven't checked back in. I already checked out. I got to check back in on it. But yeah, I guess you're feeling the same thing that they were kind of lost
And,
there.
and you can almost find the episode where they're like, okay, they ran out of ideas right here.
Mm,
They had a deadline to keep, and they came up with something. They introduced a character who's never been there before,
yep.
to try to keep the plot line going. There were like when you talk about comedies, you know, what are we going to keep it going? Someone's getting married, someone's having a baby, someone dies. Those are the three things that we can do to keep everything going. And you know, it's like people use it in books too. Run out of things to write about. All right, this person's getting married. This person randomly died. They're having a baby, and that keeps it going. So those are like your three plot threads when you're really running out of ideas.
And you can see it in some of these shows because now that you're refreshing me on Ozark, again, I can't think of the season or episode, but there was one point where they're just doing a lot of talking. They're in a living room, blah, 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 blah. It's almost as if, yeah, we got to fill, keep them going. Let's keep beating that horse around and around. And that's where I guess some people check out. I don't know. What are some of the other things with character creation that you have to keep in mind to keep it fresh?
For me, a character has to grow or change. If a character doesn't grow or change, then it's just a cardboard cutout.
Mm,
You need some movement, and I think this is where you run into trouble with television. Um, Audiences like their characters to maintain. They're solid characters. This is what they're going to do. But for writers, for books, for novelists, there has to be an arc for a character. Um, Kurt Vonnegut used to do this great thing about the shape of stories and character arcs. He had like an axis and a y-axis and the x-axis, but like a character has to face a problem, so they have to drop down and then they have to come back up because that's what the audience expects.
mm.
And he would always use Cinderella as the greatest character arc of all time because the little girl starts off very low, she goes lower, bad things happen, then slowly, incrementally, she comes up. She goes to the ball, highest point of happiness. Everyone lives happily ever after. So a
Hmm.
character, I feel, has to grow, has to change, has to face challenges. And again, if you look at like the classic books, the classic writers, they make horrible things happen to their protagonists, their main characters, and they have to overcome them. They have to change. They have to adapt. Because I think a good book will mimic life in that respect. We all face down times, and how do we recover? How do we keep going? And
Sure.
we can take inspiration from literature. Um, uh, there's a musician, Nick Cave, who talks about art as the great transcendent possibilities of humanity. whether it's music or art or literature, we see in these forms of art something that we can become, something greater, something better. And I think that's what makes a really truly fantastic character is the ability to overcome obstacles.
This could be a challenging question, but how do you create likability and empathy for a character? Now, you mentioned, characters dealing with, life's a roller coaster. Why do we care? What's being done there to make us care about a character?
The great capacity of human beings is that we can care about almost everything or anything. There's a when I teach, I do this little trick. You take a pencil, and this pencil's name is Fred. Fred's got a family, he's got a wife, he's got a kid, he's got a job.
So the pencil is Fred?
The pencil's Fred, and he's gone through a lot. He had a tough time as a kid. He overcame it, and then I snapped the pencil in half. Like, does anyone worry about Fred dying? And students are like, "Oh my God, Fred!" They're like, it wasn't Fred. It was a pencil that I just made up a story about. So human beings can connect. That's the great compassion of being human. We can connect with anything.
Hmm.
So tapping into that true empathy, where the character becomes so much more than words on a page, that they become part of your life, your family. You quote the book, you think about the character when you're not reading the book. There are so many different ways and so many ways to create that empathy. Okay. And again, for me, it's the overcoming of obstacles, um, dealing with emotions that are toxic, but being able to come through on the other side. And a lot of the characters that I love do that all the time. And then there are certain characters like the villain, the tragic villain, that you're like, I understand why you're doing these things. You're angry, you're resentful, but will that villain come out of it? So creating a character, it's easy and it's difficult because human beings can empathize with almost anything. What what will make your audience truly love your character or hate them? It's one of the great things that writers can do is to create an emotional response on a piece of paper where
Hmm.
someone throws the book or laughs out loud or cries because they've read certain words in a certain sequence and that has touched them. And in their mind, the character of Fred, they picture their father or their uncle or someone that they truly cared about. And Fred becomes something real to them. And then when you snap the pencil, they get all upset about it.
Why are some authors better at creating that connection and caring for a character?
I think but it probably goes to your personal empathy. Okay. I think writers fit into this. We are over empathetic from time to time. We start caring about things that we have no control over, and we want to fix it and we want to help and we want to make sure that everyone is going to be okay. And then that feeds into our writing, our inability to control life's tragedies factors into how we write. Again, to quote someone smarter than myself, the what humanity is at its base is broken, and we're all trying to fix ourselves in one way or another, whether it's be through art, whether it's through relationships. We
Sure.
want to make ourselves whole, and that's, I think, what makes a good writer, understanding that and tapping into that and making that character striving to be whole, but always knowing in the back of our minds it's not possible.
I never thought of the empathy aspect. Side note, I'm the one that says to other people, do you realize you're an empath? Do you know you're an empath? And I have a friend who's a nurse. Every third day, she has to take off because she just can't, deal with the pressures. She doesn't realize it. She's, I'm just drained. I'm just drained. I said, because you're an empath. So I wind up taking a strength assessment test. I'm on the board of the Girl Scouts. It was just an exercise. Here, take this test. It's the Clifford Strength
Oh
Assessment
yeah.
Test. 34 strengths it identifies. It's like a half hour rapid fire, on your phone, answer this question in this time. So I get the results back. Number one for me is communication. Okay. Yeah, I get it. Surprise for me. Number two, was empathy. So here I am calling out everybody. and and I'm the empath. I never realized that. I figured, all right, so, out of 34, maybe halfway, 15, something like that. But I never realized it. Would you say you're an empath?
Well, you have to be an empath to realize other people are empaths because you're understanding what they're going through and you can almost put yourself in that situation. Your friend, you're exhausted because you care so much. And I know that because despite my maybe not knowing it, I care.
Mark,
I
how
care
did I
about
not how did I not figure that out? Like I not figured that out. I don't know. But I get, grown man, there was a big storm, wiped out a huge pond in our area like 2 months ago. It's just big. You take your family there for decades. Just wonderful. Just a great place to go. And there's big, fish this big, 50 years they've been growing, and they're just floundering in the mud. And I actually got sad. I'm like, my gosh, look at that. The wildlife and everything. The water's gone. It'll be years before they can fix it again. And a friend of mine's like, hey, you a tree hugger? What are you getting upset over that? I'm like, I can't understand how you could not. Um, but
and then
now
that person will care about something else.
right. Yeah. Like
And
like the price of gas or something like that.
well, yeah, or like the strangers on the football team. Like they live
Right.
and die
Yeah.
with a team. And like we can't discount that because that's part a fundamental part of being human. And it goes to that idea. I'm just trying to make myself whole. I'm sad about the fish. I'm sad about, for me, the bills. And if everything works out, then I'll be fine. And I think that striving, that plateau that none of us can ever possibly get to,
Mm.
that's what makes for a good character, and that's what makes for a good story.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm seeing it now. I never even considered that. Uh, Writers, for the most part, have to be empathetic because they put that into their characters, and that's how we feel for the character because they get it. Now
Like
I get it.
your friend who's a nurse, I've known writers who are physically exhausted after writing
Uh,
because they put so much into it. And I've seen this with other artists too. I have a friend who, the violinist, after a performance, she is exhausted because everything she had went into that piece of music written hundreds of years before she was born. But she connected to it, and then the audience connects with her emotions as she's doing it.
yes.
And again, that's what we're trying to get to when we write. We're trying to reach out through our pages to absolute strangers and make them cry, laugh, be angry, or whatever it may be.
I'm a firm believer, um, and maybe this is a digression in energy, and I feel that anything we do, we put a certain amount of energy into it. And that's why some things are more popular than others. This artist is more popular than this one. This one stood the test of time than this one because it's the energy imprint, call it the empathy, whatever you want to call it, that they put into it. And then we receive it on our end. And that's why it makes a mark. Same thing with music. Why there's millions, bazillions of people that are very talented, but how come only a few of them become popular? And I'm talking outside of marketing and all of that. Why does it resonate? There's got to be something there that's going into it. I think it's the energy that you put into it, like your friend that plays violin. She puts a lot of energy into it. Why are people enjoying it? All right, they know the songs. They've been around for a long time. It's what she put into it. And I think it's the same thing with authors and writers.
I think absolutely. And again, you're trying to connect with strangers
Yeah.
who you're never going to talk to,
Yep.
and you're trying to get them to read your work and to, take your characters that you've created and make them their own, and
Yep.
they become important, and then the book becomes important, and then the empathy and the caring it comes through. And I think a good writer can make that happen. And it doesn't happen all the time, but I think there are moments where it like a puncture,
Yeah.
and you push through and you make that connection.
Yeah. Learned a lot today. Super cool talking with you, Mark. Like really,
It's always a pleasure.
really awesome. nfbpublishing.com. If you thought about going down that road, you've got some ideas, whatever it may be. Mark does it from literally start to finish, right down to helping you market the book. Awesome covers he does with his team and all of that. Start a conversation, nfbpublishing.com. Thanks for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.